What happens when you are a public figure accused of a heinous crime? Well, certainly we're seeing things play out with Brett Kavanaugh as he waits for a hearing tomorrow, squaring off with Christine Ford, Professor Christine Blasey Ford, there at the Senate Judiciary Committee in Washington, D.C. She contends that he essentially tried to rape her or almost raped her in 1982. What happens when you're a high-profile individual in the United States of America and you're accused of a heinous crime? Well, my next guest knows something about this. In the summer of 2001, Congressman Gary Condit, a Democrat from the state of California, was the subject of a media feeding frenzy. He was tried and convicted in the press. He was staked out. He was confronted and quite literally driven in large measure from public life as a result of the allegations that he was somehow involved with the murder of his intern, Chandra Levy. Now, while that summer developed in an explosive way and the feeding frenzy took place, that feeding frenzy would only be slowed down by the attacks of September the 11th, 17 years ago. Congressman Gary Condit joins us on the phone now. He is the author, along with Brett and Peace, of a book called Actual Malice that talks all about this. Happy to welcome you to the program, Congressman Condit. Good to have you here, sir.
Thank you, Brett. Thanks for the invitation.
When you see the sort of feeding frenzy that is surrounding Brett, yes.
I don't want to start off making a correction, but I want to make a correction in your introduction, if you don't mind, and I apologize for it. But it's a mistake that I hear over and over again. Chandra was not my intern. She worked at the prison bureau in Washington, D.C., and she was not my intern.
Okay.
A lot of people believe that because that's what the media fed them. They read that time and time again, and all they had to do is go check that out. She did not work for me. I did not know her. I did not get her a job in Washington, D.C. So I just want to make that correction for your audience. It's just one of those things that just keep coming back, and it's a huge mistake that the press just keeps feeding that. Like, she did not work for me.
Understood. I appreciate that, sir. But nevertheless, you were associated with her by the press. They connected you to her, and you were the subject of quite a feeding frenzy. What is it like to be at the epicenter of that sort of a thing? You're living your life one day, you're a successful congressman, you've got a bright future, you're doing good things for your constituents, and then suddenly you become public enemy number one. What is that transition like, and how did you cope with that pivot?
Well, you work on the assumption that the institutions will find the truth and everything will work out. They will find out what happened and everything will work out. Well, in my case, in what we're seeing today, the truth really doesn't matter to the people that are doing the investigation or the mainstream media who is covering it. They simply looked at it as a story about ratings, and then you had law enforcement who, for various reasons, whether they were incompetent or whether they had another agenda, another motive, just seemed to take the whole thing and turn it into a circus, and you had to deal with that. At first, I thought everybody would figure this out, and we would, we'd work through it and figure out what happened, and I was totally willing to be cooperative and do everything that I could do to help them get there. But it just seemed that the whole thing just turned into a circus, and once that happens, it's very difficult, to have a discussion about it because people have already decided how they're going to play this. So it's really devastating. It's devastating to everyone involved in the issue. It's devastating to the family. It's devastating to the person that's accused of being involved in it. And then, of course, the public just gets a lot of false information, and they begin to make judgments, which makes it very difficult for them to stay focused on what might be true. So it's just a bad situation. And unfortunately, in my case, and I see it in what's going on today as well, almost everything that was written and said about me was not corroborated. There was just, if people would have just, the journalists would have just gone out and corroborated what they were writing about probably would have solved a lot of this. And of course, the question that we're seeing today about due process is a big part of this. That everyone involved needs to get due process, and if we move away from giving people due process, our country and our society is in serious trouble. We need to follow due process. We need to follow the Constitution, and if we do those things, seems to me we can work through these kinds of situations.
When you look at what's gone on here with Judge Kavanaugh, and you see people like Chuck Schumer, I know you mentioned this on your Twitter feed, and you were outraged by this, but when you see Senator Chuck Schumer, the minority leader of the United States Senate, come out and say there is no presumption of innocence for Judge Brett Kavanaugh, how does that make you feel as a citizen and as somebody who was in a similar sort of situation as Judge Kavanaugh?
We should be very angry at the people who advocate that kind of position. It is devastating to us as a people and as a country if we give up due process, if we don't have the presumption of innocence. Every person that's walking on the face of this earth and this country are subject to this kind of behavior that on any given day, this could happen to us. And it's outrageous. And we as a group of people, as citizens, should just reject this kind of politics. What we're seeing here is in a few months, we'll move on to something else. These guys will just start talking about something else and we'll forget what they've said. We should not forget this. This is a fundamental, basic right of us as a country, due process. And it's part of our Constitution. For us to stray away from this is just outrageous. It is, and it's as simple as these guys are just, they're pandering. It's a show. Due process should be given to all the parties in this case, to the person that the allegations are made against and to the person making the allegation. But we've turned it into a show. We've turned it into a circus. We've politicized it. And we will regret if we go down this path of giving up our due process and giving up the presumption of innocence. We as a people, we're going to lose out. I don't think in my case, I did not receive due process. I know how it feels. Most people, if they haven't been through something similar to this, I know a lot of people out there listening have been through stuff in their life where people made rumors or talked about them and they had no recourse. They couldn't correct it. But just imagine this happening on this scale. And you've got these kind of people involved and you have no ability to demand justice, demand a proper procedure by which you can find out the truth. You give that up, we're giving up a lot as a society, and it's just not the path we should be going down. And I'm very disappointed to see Chuck and other people like him take this position. I just think it's just the wrong thinking and it's the wrong avenue.
In the aftermath, such as it was, of this mania in coming after you, Congressman Condit, did anybody in the press, did any of these high-profile commentators, did any of these folks, I know you were involved in a lawsuit against Dominic Dunn for publishing some particularly scurrilous things, and they're detailed, and they're talked about in this book, Actual Malice. Did anybody come to you in the aftermath of this and say, I'm sorry, or apologize, or try to in any way make amends as a result of this? Because I look at Judge Kavanaugh, and sadly, if he makes it to the Supreme Court, he's likely to see Chuck Schumer and these people who have thrown some of the most vicious punches at him at the State of the Union and at events around Washington. Did anybody ever apologize to you, Congressman?
Yeah, I had some people apologize, but not in the same enthusiasm that they made the accusations. They didn't do it publicly, nor did they make a big fanfare out of it. And the problem with Judge Kavanaugh and in these kinds of cases, apologies mean very little because you've done a tremendous amount of damage to his character and to who he is as a person. Now, he's a strong gentleman, and he'll figure out how to get through it as I have. But, it's damage. His family will, there'll be whispers. There'll be all the stuff that his children, his wife, and hopefully they're strong. But, we really don't focus enough on making a correction. It's very difficult. He'll get through it, as we we all do, but the damage is pretty significant. I did sue Dominic Dunn, and I did sue American media, and I did get the compensation, but that really wasn't enough. It didn't take care of the damage done to me. You know, and I don't mean that to sound like, you know, always me, but we as, you know, journalists and law enforcement, Department of Justice, the FBI, all these people, there is a proper way to do investigations. There's proper ways to protect people until you find out that there is really something there, that there should be, you know, an ongoing investigation, or there should be charges. There's ways to do this. The thing that we've gotten into, Brett, is this is all about ratings. It's all about a show. It's all about making the journalists stars. And they care very little about the damage that they do to families, extended family members. And he's got uncles, cousins, aunts, you know, grandparents. You've got all these people. No one has, you know, unless you've been through something similar to this, the damage is pretty severe, and it takes a long time if it ever heals. And so, you know, apologies are good, and we ought to learn how to take apologies and accept them and move on. But more important than that, we ought to be careful on how we pursue these kinds of things, the process into which we take a look at, so we minimize the damage that we do to people. You know, and once we find out there's something there, there's criminal activity, obviously you got to do it. But so anyway, yeah, they did apologize in some fashion, but I nothing that was totally adequate to me.
Congressman Condit, I'm very sorry that this happened to you. I'm sorry for any misinformation that was trafficked out there about you, and certainly I know it's cold comfort, but I do wish you well in your future pursuits, and obviously this book, Actual Malice, that you've put out with Brett and Peace. I would encourage people to get it and read it and learn something. And I'd like to extend an open invitation to have you back at some point in the near future as this scandal moves, and we can have a deeper investigation and conversation about your own personal experiences. I appreciate you, Congressman, and I appreciate you coming by.
Well, thanks, Brett. I appreciate you very much, and I appreciate you suggesting people read Actual Malice, because if you read the book, you actually can get all the details that you need that I tried to kind of touch on. The other thing I wanted to just say to you, when I do get to San Diego, I do check in on your show, and I do like the things that you do when you talk about civil liberties, and you do talk about this insane mainstream media that we have, and you and I have tweeted back and forth a few times, and I appreciate you very much, and I appreciate the invitation, and I hope that we can do this again.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time today. Good luck, and God bless you and your family.
Thank you,
Gary Condit, a lot to think about there, folks. A lot to think about there. Appreciate it. A lot to think about, a lot to digest. 877 Newsmax, rush to judgment, and the conviction without evidence. Brett Winterble Show, Newsmax TV, back right after this.